Fantastic. Kia ora. Thank you so much, Nish. Um, Alex, did you want to have anything? Did you want to start us off, or shall I start us off?
You go for it, Anita. You
Okay.
go for it.
So yeah, thanks for coming. And yeah, we would really love to hear what you think as well. I don't have I haven't added too much more in since you've looked at it, Niche, because I've been working across all 10 booklets. And so we've got all 10 kind of happening and they're getting deeper and deeper layers on it. But we've got one to show you today. But yeah, basically, one of the things that we started playing around with was how to capture the voices of the kayako really authentically. And we had a few sort of goes and we looked at developing a website and having little vignettes and we tried experimenting with different layers of feathers even at one point, didn't we, Alex? And
Yes,
um, you know, things like this, and each feather was sort of representing a different, I guess, a different voice or a different part of the story. And then we sort of wanted to weave them all together. But no matter what we tried, we put quite a lot of effort and time into it. But no matter what we tried, we just found that when we stepped back, nothing quite captured the real gem of the voices of the kayako. And in the end, we just thought, oh, we have to use their voice. And so we started recording our hui and having these sort of conversation topics. And we decided that we would turn it into a podcast with the teachers actually talking and, us capturing what they had to say. And the beautiful thing about that was it flipped the process for us. So we started off, drawing out the key findings from our different hui and thinking we could do a podcast about, each of those. But actually, when we sat down to do the podcasts, lots more things dropped out. And so it ended up being the teachers' conversations then started to drive the content. So with that in mind, we wanted to have these kind of fairly brief podcast series where the teachers are just being themselves, they're talking about different issues. And then we wanted to, our next step from there was to realize that we could see the depth and the gold in what they were saying, but we were not entirely too sure that other people might, particularly if they were listening to it outside of the context or outside of even the theoretical lenses that we'd been using. So we decided to develop a series of booklets, downloadable booklets that go with each podcast. Um, so the podcasts have actually all been finished and edited. Our first one is actually a video one, which I haven't uploaded yet, which is where Alex, Michelle, Lynn, and I are actually talking about how we would like Kayako and others to use the podcasts. And for us, we realized that we wanted people to be able to use them as a springboard for their own conversations about children's expression, holistic expression. And to do that, we felt that people who wanted to do that needed to have just as safe a culture as we had developed ourselves. So we've got a very brief video podcast where we are talking about, ideas around how people might do that and the importance of doing that. However, with the rest of the podcasts, they are actually audio ones, partly because with our ethics, we weren't allowed to identify the teachers. So that was really sad because it would have been amazing to have video podcasts. But I'll show you what we're doing. I'll share the screen if I'm able. But we learned, for anyone wanting to do podcasts, we learned some really critical things along the way. And one of them was for us, we found it was we had a go at using really high end editing software and things like that. We actually found GarageBand was by far the easiest way to go. So I think that was our first learning was to keep it really simple. And we invested in podcast recording equipment, which turned out to be such a debacle. And what we actually found was the spaces that we had to use to do the recording in, because they weren't acoustically geared for the podcasting equipment, it was a really expensive process to actually then strip out all of the background noise. I mean, we had a clock ticking, but it was so loud. And even if people moved to paper, it came up as this really loud. At one point, we had someone who was just tapping a pen while they were talking, and it just came bang, 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 almost as loud as the voices did. So we actually just ended up recording through GarageBand as well and giving up the podcast equipment. And actually, it's really clear. There are no problems with it. And so we found it very, very, very easy to do. So I would say if you're going to do a podcast, GarageBand all the way. Yeah, it's honestly so much simpler. But having said that, our Zoom podcast worked out really well as well. So we actually chose to meet over Zoom and record it and actually upload that as a podcast for the 4 project leaders, and that went really, really well. So yeah, if you were going to do it, I really wouldn't invest in all of the really expensive equipment. It's just not worth it. And the other thing we found too is for the kayako, with the headphones and the microphones and things like that, it was just a little bit, they weren't, I mean, they were still gorgeous and beautiful and insightful, but they just were not quite themselves. Whereas when we took that away and just had the computer, they were themselves. So that was good learning for us. It probably wouldn't work out if you were going to do it in a really busy environment like a kindergarten or an education and care centre, but for adults talking around in a circle in a room, it's adequate. Yeah, so that was good learning for us. We also so in terms of ethics things, a few things that we're grappling with at the moment with things like we're wanting to be true to the teacher's authentic voice. So how much controversy do we leave in? So, there's a few moments where there's some really heated stuff about the ministry, and it's, stuff that we're on board with, but actually, do we leave that in? Do we not? Because people do know who the teachers are, even though we're not allowed to directly identify them. So we are actually probably going to look at redoing one of the podcasts, Alex, stripping out some of the more controversial stuff, mostly to protect the teachers. But then what we'll probably do is talk about some of the systemic issues that they raised, but we'll put it in the booklet. So it's still there, but it won't have the heat in it, and it will be worded perhaps a little bit more softly, but still make the point that for some children we are desperately under-resourced. So yeah, but would you like to have a look? Okay, yay. Let me share the screen. It's very exciting. Oh, and I'll just close all my background windows too, because you probably don't want to see all those. Close that one. Yeah, so we're really super pleased with it. Share screen. Here we go. So what we've used is just a standard website design. Oh, can you see that okay? Yeah. All right. So we've called it K Cornet, and we decided to keep it really clean and really simple. And our first podcast with all of the kayako together, because we are interested in holistic expression, what we wanted to play around with was the idea of symbolism that happens in expression beyond words. So when we're looking at what a child might do and how that might, that's a living symbol for something. But we also wanted to play around with this idea that when we are communicating together in a group or expressing in a group, these symbols all come together and they actually start to create something within the va, within this beautiful warm space between us that is unique and actually can't happen with one person alone. And then we went a step further. Like, this is complex stuff that we're dealing with in our podcast. We wanted to go a step further and play around with the idea that our life worlds actually influence the symbols that we put into the va and our interpretation of that. So we wanted to start off with something really concrete. So we did a drawing exercise, which is what you see here. And each person had their own individual circle, and we just started, we did a little bit of mindfulness around expression and just started to draw whatever came up for us. And I was really mean. We only gave them 3 minutes, Alex, to do the thing. And then they had to pass it on to the next person. And so we went the whole way around our circle. And so these are the collective pictures. And it was really beautiful because when the pictures came back to the person who started it off, it didn't look anything like what they intended or what they thought about. And So we were able to unpack the symbolism. And what was really great was we all agreed that none of us would have drawn any of these pictures if we had been left to our own devices. Like none of our pictures would have ended up looking like this. So they were enormously rich, which is really beautiful. So this is just our introduction, and we can click on these and it takes us to the different websites. So that's our link for EPIT. And then we just have in terms of our content, we've kept it really simple. And this was sort of our guiding quote for everything that we were doing, which was try listening with the heart and not just the ears. There is a voice that doesn't use words. And so with the 10 booklets, what I'm now doing is just making sure that all of them have this idea that there's love present, that there's aroha present. And the other thing that's come in through quite strongly that I'm now overlaying across all of the booklets is trauma sensitive practices or trauma sensitive listening. So that's been really, really important. But basically, we've got each one. So we've got within a curriculum of care. This one has actually been a lot about permitting children to feel their feelings before driving it too much into their head with naming the feelings and, talking about what we're going to do with the feelings and all of that kind of thing. And so what came out for us about that one was, just teachers being very calm about children's difficult feelings and not freaking out about them and really permitting children to feel them. And so this podcast is actually about a lot about dead birds, because the teachers were having a lot of manu who are falling out of nests and flying into windows and things like this. And so they're dealing with things like children expressing grief in particular ways, or in their own unique ways. And sometimes it's not always easy. They're not, the expression isn't always easy. And so the teachers have just done such a beautiful job of talking about that. We realized we actually had to talk about expression and in the biggest sense of the word, and the fact that it's not just words and visible outward stuff around feelings. Sometimes it's what isn't being said or expressed, that's expression in itself. So this one's actually been a really hard book to write up. This is our more controversial one, the tensions in the iceberg of expression, because what the teachers were starting to pull out there were how the structural things around us really influence expression. And so, when we've got a high number of children who are neurodiverse and we don't have the resources to adequately, feed them and hold them and, all of those things, actually what happens to their expression, and it gets shut down, very, very quickly. It gets shut down, or it's not handled as gently. So there's a lot in this one around co-regulation. So teachers and adults co-regulating with the children within the book. So I'm pretty excited about that one. And then and also some real grief from the teachers when they go and do this deep sometimes pseudo or quasi, not pseudo, but quasi therapeutic work with the children, without being trained therapists, they are actually entering into that realm of therapy and doing it very sensitively. So with that one, we're actually looking at a few therapeutic models that teachers can investigate further and use quite safely in their work with children. So we've also taken some advice on that one, which has actually been really exciting. So we've got a few quotes coming into that one from a neuroscientist who specialises in neurodiversity. And she's had a look and listened to the podcast, and we've got a few quotes from her too. But I have to take them out to the teachers and just make sure they're happy with them before we roll that one out. And then children's kits out of knowledge. So actually, this sort of starts to touch on intentional teaching, but how we do it in a way that isn't the teacher forcing that that boat out of that train out of the station, so to speak. So how it's drawing what children know and can do. And someone's just put a thing in there. Kate Witt. Do you know Kate? Have you heard of Kate Witt? Oh, the question was which neuroscientist. So she is actually one of my colleagues at Te Heranga Waka, and she's really, really wonderful. She's already come into her particular approach of neuroscience with a multicultural and bicultural lens. she's very affirming um, of the identity of tamariki as a starting point, um, and very much appreciating that a brain is a brain, and while it's a big part of us, it's only a part of us. And so she's got quite a unique, well, I believe quite a unique approach to her neuroscience, which is that it's holistic. So yeah. With this podcast, I know you and I enjoy you. Oh, this one actually makes me really emotional whenever I talk about it, or think about it. And I've had to park the writing of that one just for a little bit because we want to keep it really deep. But one of the things that came through there was, and Alex and I have been seeing that as we've been going around and visiting the different kindergartens as well, is a lot of the teachers are working with children who are facing severe poverty. There's big issues around systemic trauma and intergenerational trauma, and some of the children's behavior is very, very challenging. And what we were so touched by was the teachers' active expression of I enjoy you as a human being. I enjoy you. And just seeing some pivotal moments where the children were just suddenly a foot bigger, you know, and just so we got quite curious about that and started to do some reading about that. And actually, there's a lot of psychotherapeutic literature that talks about how damaging it is for children to not be enjoyed. And the converse of that is how important it is for children to feel a sense that they are enjoyed. So we started to bring that into our expression. So there we're now starting to look at teachers' expression and children's expression merging, being this really intricate dance and how they're inseparable actually. And one of the things that we've been looking at there is we've been playing around with Kiri Dow's Rongomato, which is actually a framework for researchers uh, working with Indigenous populations, but she's looking at energy exchanges. And so, do we come in with a gesture of openness, or are we immediately blocked and a little bit defensive? Because people pick up on that, and children most certainly pick up on that. So when teachers are coming in with an ear of, I enjoy you, I enjoy you as a person, I enjoy spending time with you, I enjoy interacting with you. It means even if what a child is doing might on the surface be problematic for a teacher initially, it just means that the interaction has a different flow than if they're coming in already, with this blocked energy or blocked approach or defensive approach. And then, of course, we cannot separate all of this from whānau. So one of the teachers started talking about coming through the gate, as she did this beautiful exercise, Alex, where she literally stood at the gate and started to greet whānau and talk to whānau about, well, she had questions for them, didn't she, that dropped out of the hui. And so, it was things like one day she asked, so what is love? What is love for you when your child is here at kindergarten? What does that look like for you? And so there were some really beautiful things that came out. So we've also got the voices that are quietest, like what happens when the expression is so subtle that we have to be enormously proactive. And we've drawn on some other research around sociometrics there, which is actually looking at who do kayako talk to the most, and obviously it's the children who are approaching them. But what happens for these children who are on the outside? And how did our teachers work with that? So we've got a whole book about that, and that one's going to be quite, I know from talking to kayako out in the sector about this topic, it's a pressing one for teachers. They find it very difficult. So I'm just being a little bit careful about how we put the wording in there, because actually what we're touching on are themes of unconscious bias and unconscious favoritism. And so, with our teachers, one of the things that we just really celebrated about them, and that comes through in the podcast, is them actively accepting that as human beings, we do have a certain degree of homophily. There are people that we just find it easier to interact with. And yeah, exactly. Talking matters are right in that space. Yep. And um, yeah, so we're oh yeah, so the teachers were enormously courageous in probing their biases and their favoritisms around that, and actually sitting there and thinking, who am I not spending time with? Who am I not talking to? And then the next one was, who am I not talking to in a really positive, really, embracing, really beautiful way, so that this child knows that they are loved and adored and enjoyed here. So it's courageous mahi, because actually what we're then having to do is really get into putting aside the nice identity that we bring as teachers. And, one of the things that was just so impressive about the kako in our project were none of them came to the table saying things that I've heard other teachers say, like, oh, I love all the children equally, which I think we can all agree is bullshit. They were really honest about what they were finding troubling, what they were finding sometimes irritating, what they were finding concerning. And they were so open to probing what that was about and owning their stuff in that. And interestingly, quite often, Alex, the children who they did that inner work, the teachers did their own inner work and developed a whole new way of loving those children. And it was really beautiful. So that one, I think, is actually really important. So we've actually got, I've just got 9 here, but we've actually got 11 podcasts in total. The 11th one we haven't done yet, because what we're hoping to do is we have talked to a couple of kindergartens, and I'm about to talk to an education and care centre about them using this. So they're actually going to go through and have a go, and then we're actually going to interview them in a video podcast about what worked, and advice for other people for using it, and how it changed their practices. So that will be our final one, is actually stepping outside of the project to some new people. So we're pretty excited about that. But basically, you click on the read more when you get to the one that you want. We've got our audio podcast, which you can just click play, and it's all completely downloadable. So this is our Kornai Ipurangi. And then underneath we have the booklet, so Purongo, and that we have put into, this is all done on Canva, which we found a really good thing. But people can just go straight to the booklet and download it. And then we've actually got a link to the podcast here, which then takes them back to the website. So it's a little bit of a circle. They can't escape. But yeah, the idea is that people can print this off and they can share it or email it. But again, they can click on the links and it takes them to the 3 websites too. So this is our first one on life worlds and worldviews. So we've actually started with the theories that we were using, and some of them are not always homegrown. So one of the things that we were looking at here with life worlds, which was actually really, really important, is this idea that actually how we're experiencing things are fundamentally different. And so we can't ever come into an interaction with another human being assuming that they're experiencing the phenomena in the way that we perceive it or experiencing it. So for us, that just opened up a lot of questions about our work with children. And part of Life World is that it's so in us that quite often it's unconscious or unquestioned. So yeah. So we've sort of, as you can see, we're drawing on critical theory as well. We're going after capitalism and inequities the whole way through the booklets. Nish, you're shaking your head. Are you saying no, we shouldn't be doing that?
No, I'm shaking my head at capitalism.
Okay, excellent, good. Yeah. So, and we're starting to tease out some of the language we're using, because when we have talked to groups about this, they've said, well, why aren't you just saying communication? And oh, I'm so sorry, my chicken is now expressing herself out there, which you can probably hear. Can I just close the door so that she's like that?
And while Anita's looking after her chicken, just want to acknowledge, Anita, I know you can hear the amount of work that you've done putting this all together. The booklets have been composed by Anita and reworked by Anita. Although this is a really massive team effort, these just look beautiful. We've all been very excited about the launch, but what you're being shown is the end of a really, really long journey for us. That if I go back to the very, very start in the first podcast, it highlights the need to create a culture whereby people can share openly without being judged. So, right from the start, Anita and I were highly intentional about what would make it so the people that participated would feel comfortable to share that. And so even the design of the project was almost co-constructed, wasn't it, Anita? We'd have a framework, create a design, but the participants would send us off in different directions all the way to the end, really. So we ended up with something completely different to what we thought we would, didn't we, Anita?
Yeah, we did. And actually, I have to say, acknowledgements also to Nish and Lode too, because we had sort of conceptualized a completely different website where we were going to have a model of expression and people would click on different parts and we'd have vignettes. And it was actually really towards the end of the project that we changed our mind on that. And we did it for ethical reasons, which is that some of the vignettes that we've got are challenging. And we felt that we needed to protect the children and the teachers and just have it surrounded with a bit more information and a bit more holding, because we didn't want people to come to it with their own biases or prejudices and click on it and have stereotypes reinforced. And so we were enormously grateful that at the 11th hour we went, can we change our mind on our deliverable and do something different?
Lou said yes, and we said, oh, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we were so relieved and so grateful about, the responsiveness of Epic. So thank you. That was so meaningful for us and really important, actually. Really important. So yeah. But I mean, it's been quite neat because we go back to the teachers and they quite often they say, "Oh no, it's all good," or they've got things that they want to add, and it's just fabulous. So yeah, so then we sort of once we get past the theory, we start to get into our findings, and so this is where we have quotes from the teachers, and these have been lifted out of the podcast. And so they might be the core quotes that we sort of feel like some of the things are situated around. And I mean, isn't that beautiful, that one? If you have the well-being of the child absolutely paramount to the situation, you will always be looking to find out what's happening, not telling off or assuming there is misintent. So already we can start to see some of those themes around, whether someone's coming in with blocking, whether they come in and communicating that they enjoy the child and they're open. So yeah, and some of the things have been quite hard to pin down to a word, and particularly words in English. We've discovered working with multicultural communities that often the English words are not they just don't really cut it. So that's been a bit of a complexity. But hopefully when we do the sort of write-outs for the things, the concepts start to be a little bit more nuanced, I guess. So yeah, this one, although we've called this part diversity, it's actually quite often about teachers getting back to partly their intuition, but also partly that ability to sit with things that are indescribable. And so, here we've drawn on the Samoan concept of va, the sacred relational space between people. But throughout the whole thing, there's we're hoping that there's this idea of warmth, but also this idea of sitting with feeling, sitting with intuition, and being okay with uncertainty as well. So we do also probe the idea that we are coming in with our stuff. So what we might think is intuition actually could just be our bias. So we've got a whole lot that we've written in about that as well, and how we started to work with that. But it was really lovely to start to use this word desirable. Diversity is desirable. And that for us, it probably sounds like a really small thing, but I've started using that phrase, quoting effort and this project with my students at the university. And for them, they've actually found it quite a radical reconceptualization because they talk about the importance of embracing multiculturalism and the work that we can do to do that, but actually kind of going, this is actually desirable, this is what we want, and actually if you've got a culturally homogeneous center, there's something really, really wrong and the children are really missing out. So that's been quite a lovely thing kind of in the mainstream space, I guess. Yeah, and then as the next sort of theme that sat alongside this idea of diversity being desirable is that when we can be open to the different ways that we express ourselves, actually there's this richness that we just can't achieve when we're in a monocultural or any kind of homogeneous group. So yeah, that was just really for the life, idea about life worlds was just really important. So then, and we're also talking about structure and agency. A lot of our teachers have faith-based lives, and that has to come into their practices. So it was important for us that we didn't strip that out in terms of what we're writing about, because it's such a core thing of how they see the world and how they see children and their meaning and purpose that they bring to their mahi as well. So we are looking also here at agency and what contributes to that agency. So some of it is structural, like ratios and whether we've got the right number and right kind of support people, but it's also going into that really deep idea about identity, about beliefs, the whole person really, as part of that agency. So we've got little vignettes that we're kind of bringing in there, and just sort of realizing how sensitive the children are also to the adults. And so in this example, which is one that Alex brought, that we had these gorgeous children who they would speak in their home languages and their Arabic languages together, but as soon as they were near any of the teachers, because I don't think any of the teachers spoke Farsi or any of the Arabic languages, and they would immediately switch into English even if they were not talking to the teachers. So even though they were 3 and 4, they had this understanding that the teachers couldn't understand them, and by switching to English, it was this idea of inclusion and being together, this togetherness. So of course, obviously the teachers wanted to reciprocate and started to learn vocabulary as well. So yeah, and then we've got practice examples. So this is from our observations. We've tried this on some of the students at work, and these have sat the booklets have sat really, really well, and they particularly like the examples from teachers. So, or from observations. So, and we've used children's artwork the whole way. This one's a little bit of a pressing one. This is one of my ones where I was working with a child, and we were working with the marble run, and she kept doing the finger to me. I don't know if I told you this story. Anyway, and I just kind of got curious about that. Well, no, and I mean, this was really interesting. At first, I felt myself stiffen, like, she did the finger to me. Oh my God, But then as a lot of the kaupapa of our project has actually been to be curious as the starting point. And so I had this stiffening, and I had to move that out of the way and go, actually, what is this about? What is she, she's 3. I mean, really, is she really understanding what this gesture means? Chances are probably not. But she might have an idea that it might be a socially aggressive gesture, perhaps, but I don't know this. I'm making a lot of assumptions because I don't know this child. And I started watching her, and she was pulling the finger to some of the other children and some of the teachers. And we had this totally beautiful moment where one of the teachers said to her, "Oh, would you like some fruit?" I didn't put it in here, but they said, "Oh, would you like some fruit?" And she did the finger, and the teacher said, "Oh, would you like a drink of water?" And took her to get some water. And I'm like, how did you get water out of that? And basically what had happened is because they realized that she was quite new. She was, learning to find her feet. She was sort of coming in with a little bit of, this was just what she was doing, as part of her way of communicating in the centre, making herself feel safe, perhaps, we don't know, but this was her communication. And what the teachers wanted to do was, rather than shut it down, go with it, and then build on it so that it became more pro-social, which it did actually happen quite quickly. But it was just a beautiful moment for me, because it's a curious thing to observe. And I was curious to observe myself. So this has been part of the project too. And with the teachers, one eye on the children, one eye on ourselves all the time. And for me, I was like, wow, my Pakeha middle class, nice kind of non-sweary, kind of upbringing. Oh, actually, no, I had quite a sweary upbringing, but probably not in terms of pulling the finger. But I was an army child, so there was a lot of swearing actually. But yeah, I had to kind of really and if I'd gone with my response, before this project, if I'd gone with my response, I might have addressed that in terms of the outward thing of what she was presenting. But if we go to Hersel's life worlds, it doesn't mean the same thing to her. And it was obvious that it didn't mean the same thing to her that it did to me. So if I had responded from my bias, immediately we would have had an expression disconnect. So yeah, so we've got a few, and so you can see what I mean about us not wanting to just put these vignettes without the unpacking up there. Because if we had something like that, I mean, they're not all like that, obviously, but we do have a few that we thought were quite important, because it did point to biases and things that people experience. We didn't want to just have the untroubling, really beautiful magic moments. We wanted to have the gritty stuff in there too, but we also want it to be held safely. So again, thank you, Nish. Thank you, Lou. So yeah, and I mean, this again is this idea that there's the societally accepted meaning of a word or a gesture, but there's also how the individual might be intending it, and those can be radically different things. And that was a really good example of that. So then what we're also leaning towards is then at kaiako, at Hui, that kaiako might have, giving them activities that they might like to do together that we've done ourselves and found really helpful. So this is our drawing activity. And then we've also got reflective questions, which is what we're hoping to trial with our centres that will lead for the last podcast. So yeah, and then we've got references that people can look at if they want to follow up. So that is our website and our podcast and our booklets. And yeah, they're just, the amount of work that the Kako and Alex have put into this is just huge. And it's not, it's a bit, as we say, it's sometimes glitchy. But we've just wanted to keep it homegrown and real and true to ourselves, really. So yeah, I've just gone on and on. I'm so sorry, Alex. I should pass over to you.
No, no, you've done all this wonderful work, Anita. It's something that's I feel we started in the right place when we started with this whole project, and it's pretty much you've got to see the project as a journey from a start to the end. It doesn't sit in isolation. So we've got a report that will also sit in there. And looking at, in order to be able to look at with such depth, Anita had some wonderful people talking to us, Dr. Orongatikai Nata and Dr. Leslie Rameka and Dr. Ellie Glasgow, and just asking, what's your thoughts around whatu manawa and expression? And if we hadn't had Rongo and Leslie and Ellie coming in from a Pacific perspective, allowing us to do some deep exploration in that space, that I really firmly don't believe the teachers would have said what they said. The teachers made really awesome cultural connections with these people, and Anita and myself, Michelle, and Lynn Wright was also involved. We needed to be really conscious that we needed to step back, because we can talk for Africa, right, Anita?
Yeah.
More of us. We can, starting with me. But the information around exploring really hard to pin down transcendent concepts, it was really important, wasn't it, Anita? Like looking at whatu manawa, because everybody's got a different take on what that might look. And you don't have to memorize a sentence to say, Whatu Manawa is this. You just need to explore the underpinnings and listen to different people. So it put us in a position where we could listen to our kaiako. And they also listened to us because the interconnectedness that came from that meant we could just go down to the next level of learning and feeling and doing.
Yeah.
Anita, you and I, we really, really struggled around how are we going to make this make sense for other people that might be coming from a really different place. There's a lot of pressure on teachers, particularly in the primary sector, on one aspect
Mm.
of language or communication without seeing the wider picture. So to create the booklets and make the podcast make sense with the context and explain the interconnectedness is absolutely essential so people don't get lost with it.
Yeah, that's so true. So yeah, we've got the third booklet is pretty much mostly about Whatu Manawa, so the seeing eyes of the heart. And it was beautiful for us and difficult for us at the same time because the people who we brought in to consult with and work with us on Whatu Manawa, they didn't want us to freeze it. And so we ended up with it as a lived concept that we couldn't define. But we seem to kind of get what we meant by it, hey Alex. So now we're now in the process of in the book in the third book. I think we've just about got it so that other people will get it too. But, how we've conceptualized it without while keeping it flowing and living and not pinning it down too much. But it's been such an extraordinary journey for us. And, Rongo, as part of this idea of Whatu Manawa, it was sort of Rongo that started to bring in intuition. And he did this crazy thing with us where he got COVID masks and he got people to put them over their eyes and then he gave us big sticks basically. And we had to crawl around on the floor and whack each other without seeing seeing each other. But the crazy thing was that people and then everyone, so we had two people in the middle with sticks and COVID masks on their eyes, and then everyone else standing around in the circle. It was such a clever way to make the point. People intuited where the circle was, where people were standing. They didn't actually need to feel where it was, and they intuited where the other person with the stick was too. Sometimes people got whacked quite quickly, didn't they, Alex? But it was a really interesting exercise and really made us realize that expression is so beyond what we say and do, so beyond what we say and do. So I haven't asked the team, but I've got a few photos where you can't see people's faces, where we're on the floor with sticks. Whacking each other. So I'm hoping I'll send an email out and ask if we can put one of those in, but it's pretty funny. Yeah, but we also learned too that there's a lot of games and like Māori games that were actually designed for honing this intuition within, like clapping games and things like this. It's amazing. I had no idea. So yeah, it sort of made me rethink curriculum a little bit too.
Mm. And some of what happened for teachers and also as an outcome for children in terms of encouraging their expression, some we put in, some we didn't, was just so immensely powerful for that child and for their whānau. And ethics-wise, we can't include anything. It's really hard to convey, but the importance of opening out conversations about expression and broadening them to include so many people because progress is something that can be fixed and really subjective as a word, but children moved through their learning very, very quickly when those realms of expression were open, when teachers weren't just honing in on one thing, broadening out, children started developing in so many different ways. So it created a fluency that's not just spoken, but a fluency in all senses. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does. That's a good thing to say. Yeah, the whole child, absolutely, Andrea. Yeah. Yeah. And the whole child within the whole family too, you know.
Mm.
And I mean, one of the kindergartens in particular, at one point they had nearly every single child on their roll under Oranga Tamariki. And then the children were coming to kindergarten, and you could just really see that the part of, words like institutionalization were coming through, and things like this. And you could see that the teachers just wanted to offer almost like a something else that wasn't institutionalized. And so a lot of their practices had to go in the opposite direction, which is about love and enjoyment and warmth and flexibility and responsiveness and all of those other things. It was very, yeah. Oh, yes. Madeline, did you want to say something?
Um, I just wondered if you could just say a little bit more about, the centres and teachers you were working with. Are they part, were you working with a cluster or a group or all in one location or that? And what their relationship with was part of the work, any interacting between centres?
Alex, do you want to answer that?
Yes, all of the kindergartens that we worked with were He whānau Manaaki kindergartens. So we are connected by a common organisation within a small geographic space. So from one kindergarten to the other, there's only about 10 kilometres. So we're working within a very similar community.
Yeah.
Porirua East to begin with exclusively, and then one kindergarten in Porirua West as a teacher moved through. So they were all slightly different model kindergartens. There were standard 40-child kindergartens, but there was one large kindergarten and full year. So the teachers they all pretty much knew each other, but they were used to the same systems and expectations, and they are all trained teachers. Because He whānau Manaaki teachers are only trained.
And I'm sure you find, as we quite often do, is that even with the proximity and the relationship, centres are all unique,
Absolutely.
and also it changes as the dynamic changes with a cohort of teachers. Cool.
Yeah. It was a beautiful thing for us because we were able to have regular hui where we brought all of the teachers, or we brought representatives from the teachers team together, the teaching teams together. And I think it's safe to say that we actually developed such a love for each other. And yeah, it was really amazing, wasn't it, Alex?
Yes, there's such an advantage to being able to do a project, and thank you to EPIT for allowing us to extend our project over a longer period of time, because we built this real culture of it was actually a lot of fun. You know, the participants that came to the hui, oh yeah, we got a hui, we got a hui. So what are we going to do now? I don't know. We're going to just show up and be ourselves and do what we need to do. And also, He whānau Manaaki are big on manaakitanga. So they gave us really great food. And, just that circle of familiarity and warmth and the whole package. So, because when you look at, I suppose you look at some of the content and look what sits behind that, you could become quite immersed in things that are really difficult. So the podcast, when I listen to them, they're really funny a lot of the time. They're just these wonderful, diverse experiences that highlight the work that teachers did to consider how they encourage children to express themselves. And kids are funny. That's it. Our kids are really funny. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. But I mean, one of the things that I just delight in about this project is that a lot of the things that came out of it as being really, 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 really important aren't necessarily things that are in teacher education. And so for the teachers, at first, we had to do a lot of work saying, actually, this is the gold, and it was actually just their own wisdom. It was the wisdom that they were bringing to it that actually sat outside of their teacher training often, and a real desire to be a I don't want to use the word good. What word do I want to use? A human being that makes a difference in the world, that makes a positive difference in the world. That they just had such a strong moral commitment to that. And so it was that stuff that this project actually ended being about, really, as opposed to, specific pedagogical techniques or things like that. So for me, it's been a beautiful reorientation to, deeper philosophies and philosophical ideas about teaching as an art and teaching as a human to human art in particular.
Pam, I see you've got your hand up.
Oh,
Kia
sorry.
ora. Oh man, I just loved that. It was there were lots of things that were racing through me. So thank you so much. It's an incredible project, and I can see the learning that you're doing. But one of the things that reminded me was, I think, Anita, you just alluded to it, was that you were unpacking the things that in my day in classrooms people used to call the X factor. And I would always say we've got to explain the X factor because otherwise it's a mystery and we don't know what's going on. And that's been my life kind of work, really, is to try and understand that. So I really appreciate what you've done there. And the other thing that struck me was the idea of gems, which you used, I think you used the word, as something that Sarah Dione and I have been using and other work we've done, and you'll know Sarah, of course, Anita. And it's fun. Sometimes you don't recognize them, eh? They suddenly come to you, and then you realize those gems talk to more than just a teacher. They talk to the community, they talk to the child, they talk to you, and everybody knows what they've got to do to create that. And so those are the two things that really struck me. I was thinking about the other thing that was there about recognizing your own bias. It was actually Mary Berryman, and really early on in 2003, who tracked people's movements and where they were in the classroom. You probably know about that. And so they actually came away with a figure saying, well, these are the kids you never spoke to. These are the kids, and so this whole business of not even understanding that, but it was quite confronting. We used to call that dissonance, right? But in this way, you've brought that out in a way that's inquisitive for themselves and thinking, oh, I'm not so sure that I do that. So it's moved my head around, just professional development can be confronting when you have got an idea in your head what's important, and the sort of tools that we use and I certainly created dissonance. Sometimes deliberately, but it was, it's this business if we can only make a difference if people understand their own space. And so I really, really appreciate what you're doing. Can't wait to see it all in place and spread it through our area as well, because it's a fantastic piece of work. Good thing you didn't have to try and get a Marsden though, I've got to say, having,
Oh,
I don't know whether you saw what Marsden were doing in the last 2 days, but you have to be a science person to get anything out of Marsden now. But none of this work counts anymore, and it's just unbelievable. Anyway, I shouldn't have left it on that note. I should not have left it on that note. Because we're lucky enough to have EPID and other funders that are willing to look at this sort of work and have it community led. So yeah, awesome. Ka ora.
oh, thank you. And just in terms of spreading it, our sort of exciting one little offshoot that started to happen is there's a new organisation starting in Reikorangi, which is just out of Wellington, which is a farm, and it's a pushback against boot camps for youth offenders. And they've become really interested in our work and have since asked me to be on their exec to kind of speak in about what we're doing and bring that into what they're doing. So that's also really exciting. So we've gone from the little ones, and now we'll be looking at how we can help rangatahi. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting too.
Yeah, understanding these fine points of expression. Amazing, isn't it?
really.
Carolyn, I see you've popped up a couple of things in the chat. Do you want to elaborate?
Sorry, I've got such a sore throat.
Oh no.
I couldn't really say much, but I tried to get a few things in the chat. But I just wanted to say, well done, ladies, on your mahi. And I just put in there that, the gold of what we do and what we see is often just so hard to measure. But I think you're measuring it so beautifully in the vignettes. And yeah, I'm excited to see it actually. Are we allowed to see it in its entirety when it's all done? Because yeah. Beautiful. Well done. Kapai.
Thank you.
Kia ora. We have a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to also acknowledge everything that's been said so far, guys. This is amazing. It was so exciting to see and hop on to the website as well. Thank you for giving us access, firstly. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what as more of them pop on. I'm not sure if there is a schedule for when you plan on dropping them, and I'm sure you will release them to us, and we can share that out wider, Anita and Alex. I'm also being a parent looking at this and how amazing it is a tool from the parent lens and a whānau lens and a caregiver lens to thank you, Madeline. We'll see you soon. But from that lens and how beneficial it can be for supporting parent interactions with their own kids. All right, team. I think that's probably all the time we've got today. But thank you again to the team presenting. Thank you to everyone who made the time to pop along today as well. I don't have a closing karakia prepared, but I'll just find one real quick because we've got a whole bunch of them. Okay. Oh gosh. All right, I'm going to close this off with the karakia team, unless anyone have anything closing they wanted to say.
Yes, please.
Sorry, Ollie, good go.
I wasn't waving goodbye. I was just saying.
Oh,
Anita and Alex, I see some real synergies with our work with, I know you're doing it with Kako, but with the whānau, and I'd love to have a chat with you if that's possible. How do we get in touch?
I will put
well, the email, sorry,
no.
the email addresses are in the email that I sent
brilliant.
out with the Scott. So
That's
everyone's, yeah,
Okay,
so that's
fantastic.
available.
Okay.
Do you want
We'll
to
be in-
karakia?
Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to close this off, Pam.
Okay. Taki ni te karakia. Uni he te pō whiri marawa. Tonu ki te ao whata tangata. Tata ki raro. Tata ki ronga. Tata ahoro. Homie. Hui tai ki.
Yeah. Kia ora, everybody, and kia ora, Pam. Thank
Very
you for that.
karameti.
Yeah, have a lovely end of year festive break and stay safe, everybody. We'll catch you in the new year.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you.
Ka kite.